Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we are finishing up the series we've been doing for the last 5 weeks on kind of going through the backlog of listener questions that have been suggested to us, just kind of things that never made it to the front because there were other things to talk about that were important. We've had a lot of great conversations over the last 5 weeks talking about this stuff, and on today's episode, there's one question left that I want to go over because I think it's important, especially as a person moves up in their leadership career. I think this is more likely to be a problem when a person is further along in their career than when a person is just starting out. The question came from a listener who says that basically they have a tough time with the amount of digital communication that is being asked of them, that they're used to talking to people in person, whether it be over a video call or, actually a conversation in person, and they've moved into a leadership role. And now so much more of their communication is done via email or Slack or message, whatever the app is that is the app of the day, all of these different things. And they find themselves feeling like they're being misinterpreted, or that people are they're having a problem with what they're saying over those apps or those messages because they feel like their intention is being lost in the context. And I think it's a real concern for a lot of people. And I know people over the years who have virtually stopped communicating digitally and will just pick up the phone and call people because they just don't want this to happen. I don't think that's necessarily the solution. In the age that we're in, you have to be able to use these tools effectively, but it can come back to bite you if you don't use them correctly.
Yeah, it's a real thing. I've gotten caught up in it myself sometimes.
Yeah.
And then I've been in situations where maybe I've responded to something via text message or email or something, and then I immediately get a phone call from someone, and they're just like oh hey, and it's like, oh no, like that's not even what I meant. You know what I mean? Like it definitely is. I think the speed of which things happen this day and age, and the speed of which decisions happen, because I really think a lot about this. Like, what is the difference over the last couple of decades when it comes to how we communicate, and why do we have so many different platforms and ways, and things that overlap themselves? I can send the same digital message via 7 different ways, and it's like, so what? Why? Well, I think a big part of that is because so many decisions are happening, and the speed to make the decisions has changed quite a bit over the decades, and I think that's something that is not going to go away anytime soon. And I think the best the best potential outcome is that we have less things to use. Everybody aligns on the same communication vehicles, because then it's much easier to manage. But it doesn't change the fact that this skill and this capability and this understanding of how to send digital communication is going to be critical. And there's a lot of things that are being done now in technology to even help to craft messaging. And then there are things that you even see generationally. And I'm an example of one of those things, which I saw the other day, was like how different how different generations communicate via digital. And one of the things that they say, like, millennials do, and I'm guilty of this, is they type LOL on everything.
Right.
And it's a way of softening whatever the message is. It's a way of letting somebody know, like, yeah, I'm responding, but don't take this serious, or like, it's not a it's like if something was to happen and I just say thanks, that can come across as like I don't know, like condescending. It can come across as like sarcastic, I guess. Or I could say thanks, LOL. It seems softer, right? Like it doesn't seem like it. So like there are things that I already read in this article that I do that are just things that I didn't even really realize that I was doing. But these are things that I think are important as we all get more and more comfortable with a style of communication that gives absolutely no nuance at all.
Right.
To thoughts, to feelings, to joking around, that type of thing. So I think it's definitely something that we can continue to talk about. And I think that leaders, especially as you continue your career, you spend more time doing this than less time. It's really important that you get good at it.
Right, for sure. I think that if the context of this question is about lowering the likelihood of miscommunication, maintaining a high level of clarity, because clarity is so important in terms of making sure that if you're a leader of people, that you and your employees are on the same page with what the expectations are, and I think that the different ways of communicating, they can muddy the waters if they're not used correctly. And so one of the pieces of advice that I got from a leader once that I really value was that if you wouldn't be comfortable with whatever you're about to type being displayed on the Jumbotron in Times Square, then don't type it. Because if that's the litmus test, if that's the kind of the bar, then significantly less things would be sent digitally, right? You'd pick up the phone and call somebody, or you'd wait till you were with them face to face. The things that belong in, let's start with, one of the most common, let's start with email. The things that belong in email communications, they shouldn't be misinterpretable at all. You should be able to send an email to 10 different people and then ask them to tell you what was said. There shouldn't be any variation between what they respond back with, because what you've put is purely factual. There's not a hint or an element of subjectivity or emotion or sarcasm or any. If you're trying to lighten up your emails as a leader with LOLs or jokes or whatever that is, then that implies that what was said first in the email doesn't belong in an email to begin with, because there shouldn't be anything to lighten up. There shouldn't be anything to soften. It should just be a kind of a factual communication. And then there are other methods you have of communicating that might be, that are better than email when it comes to those things, whether it be a video call if you have a remote team, or an actual phone call, or waiting till you're in person to explain something. An email could be a recap of a conversation you already had, so there's no way to misinterpret it. It's just kind of like, hey, just make sure we're on the same page. I do that often. I'll have an hour-long conference call with a team of people, and then I'll send a follow-up email on after the call, like just to make sure we're all on the same page. This is what I heard. This is what my responsibility is going forward, like my homework to do for until the next meeting. This is what somebody else is doing. And it's done in a very factual way, almost bullet point way, so that people have kind of like a record, or the meeting minutes, if you will. But no one could look at that and think, oh, Chris has negative intent when it comes to this. I might get something wrong. I might have put a responsibility on one person where it belongs to somebody else, but that could be corrected, right? Like you respond, oh no, it's this person, not this person. That's fine. No one's going to get offended by that. They're just going to correct it and move on. If a person has the ability or even the potential of misinterpreting something where they think that you either are angry with them or annoyed with them or standoffish with them, or that the relationship isn't where it needs to be, then that thing shouldn't belong in an email communication. It should belong in a conversation.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great call out, and I'm a big fan of meetings that could have been an email.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because it's there's only certain things that you can do and discuss when you're face to face, and I think that's an important call out. So like, there's a lot of things that can be done digitally. There's a lot of things that you can communicate. There's a lot of things that you can do on informing. There's questions that you can ask. There's a lot that you can do in the digital space, in the digital world. And so the speed of which I can send something, and again, like I can just tell you in my own habits that I tell my teams, I'm like, if it's an email, most of the time it's just forwarding some information, or if I ask a question, it's like, get back to me when you can, right? I'm going to utilize like text message if I have an immediate need, or I need you to have some information like right now, and something that's important today that you need to have access to. And then I might use a different vehicle if I want it to be something that is more collaborative and something that's easily searchable, or that it's something that we may need to look back on because people save text messages, delete text messages, like that type of thing. But a different platform that maybe your organization uses allows you for different levels of collaboration, but also easier to search different things. So, I think that there's a ton of value in all the digital communication. But to your point, like the time of understanding like what is used for what, and then how you get the most effective responses is going to come down to how you communicate in these platforms, but also like the reflection of you. Like I think that's an important part of it, is that when you have the face-to-face time and the interactions, that's how people read you. That's how people know you. They read your message digitally. They don't automatically assume that it's negative or accusatory or anything if they know who you are and how you communicate in general. And over time, they get used to how you write. And I think so, like, but that takes time. So again, if you're a new leader, if you're leading a new team, if you're new to an organization, all these things right off the bat are going to be looked at and considered, because nobody really knows you yet like that in spaces, and you've got to be able to understand that when you initially start to communicate via digital world.
No, I think you're spot on with that. I think, if I think about what you're saying, you're talking about the relationship with each individual person. So, if I am new to a team, I don't have a relationship with those people yet, and so I have to be very clear on what methods of communication I use so that nothing is misinterpretable. The best, it's like, what's the term, the football term, the sports term, the best defense is a good offense, or the best offense is a good defense, that kind of thing. This is the exact same thing. The best way to make sure that you're not going to be misinterpreted digitally is to not use digital communications, right? So that's the best way. But that's not possible. So let's figure out what the right way is, which is to, if you're new to a team, or if you're communicating with people with whom you don't have a lot of history of communication with, or people who you don't know personally, people who you haven't interacted much, then that way of communicating needs to truly be segregated to the factual kind of recap, informational email kind of thing. If it's something that could be misinterpreted, but the person you're sending it to is someone who you have a decades-long relationship with hundreds of in-person interactions and an assumption of positive intent between the two of you, then there's almost nothing you could say digitally that they would misinterpret, because they're looking at it in the context of the entire relationship with you. And so that's really what it comes down to, is that if you're being misinterpreted by somebody because of something you sent digitally, it means that the relationship isn't there to begin with, right? So that the work needs to be done there, because the failure is A, in the lack of relationship, and B, in the assumption that there was a relationship when there wasn't one, so that you could use this method of communication. And you can get past the first one by having a relationship with somebody, but that takes time. It's not something you can force to happen, and it's about quantity and quality. So you can't just say, oh, I've had 2 interactions with this person over the last 6 months, but they've both been really positive interactions. Yeah, that's not enough, right? If you have an interaction with that person every day for the last 3 months, that is enough, right? Unless those interactions are not quality interactions and they are antagonistic, or there is a kind of a rift in the relationship, then don't use the digital communication for whatever you're trying to say, unless it's factual and informative. And so it's a both. You have to have the history and the quantity of the relationship, and it has to be a good relationship in order to be not misinterpreted in something that isn't just factual or informative. And those conversations belong in person, or over video call or whatever it is, so that you are far less likely to be misinterpreted. And then the email comes after the fact to follow up. Hey, just verifying what we talked about. I want to make sure you have a record of this so that we can move forward. And I think if you think about why leaders don't go this route, it's expediency. Right? Like they know they have positive intent. I know I have positive intent. So they should assume that I have positive intent. Okay, yeah, in a perfect world, yes. But that's not how it always works. And so you can't just assume that because you have positive intent that they will accept it that way, or they will interpret it that way. If the goal is just, hey, you know what, this is the way it is, they can take it or leave it, sure, maybe. But that's not what most relationships between a leader and an employee are. In most relationships, the win isn't communicating effectively. The win is some type of behavioral change or follow-up or action on the part of the person that you're sending the communication to that is needed in order to be considered a success. So if your boss is looking at whether or not the thing was done and it wasn't done, but they look at you and go, "Oh, well, look at you clearly sent them an email. You're off the hook there." That's not how that's not how things work. Usually the boss will come to you and say, "Why isn't this done?" "Oh, well, I sent them an email." Right, but then what did you? Yeah, that's not enough.
Yeah.
It has to be done. So if the goal is that behavioral change or the action happening, then you have to do what is needed to alter your communication style or method or venue of communication to get the result you're looking for. That's the win, is the result you're looking for, not just to be able to expediently send them information.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1-minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, this episode's 1-minute hack is about effective communication and lowering the levels of miscommunication and lack of clarity. If you're a leader and you're having a difficult time with this, if you've been told by somebody or by multiple people that they didn't like the way that you came off in this email or this message, and your response was, or your reaction was, "Oh my gosh, I didn't mean it that way. That's not what I meant." Then this means you need work in this area. And the way to do this is when you are writing something that is going to be sent in an email or via any type of digital communication, to save it as a draft or as a take a screenshot of it or write it in a note somewhere and have somebody else look at it first, someone that you trust to look at it, to tell you how they would interpret it. And if you really want to take this to the place where it should go, the person who you should ask to do this is the person who reached out to you at one point to say, "I didn't like the way you communicated this," and your reaction was, "Oh my gosh, that's not what I meant." Because that person is being honest with you already, and they will. If you go to the person who's just your closest friend in the workplace, it is likely that they will interpret it differently than a person that you're sending it to begin with. And if they look at it and go, "Yeah, it looks great to me," well, yeah, that means that when they received it, they wouldn't interpret it negatively. But that doesn't mean that a person who doesn't have a relationship with you also wouldn't interpret it negatively. It could mean that might be the right person, but you want objective eyes to be looking at this. So this is someone who you can trust to give you the right answer, but who isn't already so familiar with you that they can read through the nuance that might be in a piece of communication and not interpret it negatively. Go to the person who had the problem to begin with, and you're likely to solve both problems at the same time.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where, you don't get to decide if you're getting better.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
does.
Yeah. If you're going to work on this, it does take a partnership. It does take people around you, and to your point, it takes the people that maybe it hasn't landed with well, because they're the ones who have a different filter or different perspective, or to your point, a different relationship. And they're going to have the most amount of information on what you can do differently or how you can adjust to not come across in certain ways. And look, the underscoring answer to all of it is spend time with those people and more time with them, and you'll build a better relationship and you'll have less of this happen. But there's definitely an element of this that is just around communication skills and the nuance and how you go about doing it. Because again, you're not always going to have the luxury of time to just be able to be I'll, even they'll get to know who I am, and then at that point, everything will be fine. Well, maybe not. And if you're not capable of growing and building the skill, you might not ever make it to that chance of time where you're able to build the relationships. And so it's definitely a key element, and something that I do think is really important, especially this day and age. And as much as we communicate in the digital world, I think it's something that everybody should be, considering, thinking about, and working on.
Right. And if you are new to a team who doesn't have the history with you, really try to have as many interactions as you can in person, or if it's a remote based team, over a video call, both as a group and more specifically one-on-one with each person. Get to know them individually, share things about yourself, and ask them questions about them that are not work related. Develop a rapport with them based on things that are not just what the job is, and you are far less likely to be misinterpreted, because a person can read something and think, "Oh, I feel like I know who this person is. I don't think they would say it this way. I don't think they mean this, even though it's easy to interpret it this way. That's the ultimate goal. That's the armor against it, because then even if you do something incorrectly, it's not going to come back and bite you, because no one's going to misinterpret it. No one's going to have a lack of clarity. That's the ultimate. The step one is to be very clear on what you're using each thing for, and kind of towing the line on where to do this and where to do that. That's what you do while you're building the relationships. But if you're doing that for a long time, that implies you haven't put the work into the relationships to where you feel like you still have to do all these things. In an ideal world, you get to a place where this is less needed, because the people you're talking to on a daily basis are the people who have a very strong relationship with you.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.